Welcome to Business Communication. Our first portion that we'll cover is professional communication in a digital, social, and mobile world. By the end of this, you should be able to explain the importance of effective communication to your career and to the companies where you'll work. Explain what it means to communicate as a professional in a business context. Contrast the conventional communication process model with the social communication model. Identify 5 major benefits of business communication technology and 3 major innovations that have reshaped the practice of communication. To define ethics, explain the difference between an ethical dilemma and an ethical lapse, and list 6 guidelines to make ethical communication choices. And to be able to identify 6 related skills that you will have the opportunity to develop as you work on communication of this course. Now, on the job, communicating as Effectiva. So Rana El Kalbouli leads the Effectiva efforts to make commuter systems better and understanding and reacting to human emotions. Now, understanding why communication matters, you should be able to explain the importance of effective communication to your career and to the companies where you'll work. Communication is the process of transferring information and meaning between senders and receivers using one or more written, oral, visual, or electronic channel. Successful communication involves a transfer of understanding. Here in this figure, we have sharing information and understanding. Communication can happen in a variety of ways, including successful transfers of information and understanding. And these 3 exchanges between a software project manager on the left and his boss on the right illustrate the variety of ways in which information is shared between senders and receivers. So on your left-hand side, you see him stating, the new app is on schedule, transmitted meaning, rate is on schedule, and I don't need to worry. Everything is fine. Well, 2 designers quit, but I'm trying to replace them. That negotiated meaning is, are you worried about anything? So are you still on schedule? But now there is some kind of slip. And then there's, I think everything is fine. That recreated meaning is, uh-oh, he doesn't sound confident or in control of the project. Communication is important to your career. The changing nature of employment is putting new pressure on the communication skills. So it will be important for you to communicate effectively in each new role you take in your career. So if you become an independent contractor or a freelance worker, communication is become and will become especially important as you sell yourself into each new contract. Communication is very important in management roles. We have top executives spend the majority of their time communicating, and business people who aren't effective communicators are less likely to be successful. So if you move into an executive role, communication will likely consume the majority of your time. Now, communication is important to your company. Communication is important in 3 different ways. We have operations, intelligence, and relationships. So first, communication is important in operations because companies need that fast, effective communication among all levels of organization. Second, communication is important in intelligence between companies that need to be alerted to new opportunities, risks, and problems by keeping an ear to the ground. And lastly, communication is important in relationships because a business's effective communication strengthens the connections between the stakeholders, and it can foster the emotional connections that create a healthy work environment. Now, what makes business communication effective? So to make your communication efforts as effective as possible, you want to focus on making them practical, factual, concise, clear, and persuasive. Provide practical information. So useful information helps to solve problems and pursue opportunities. You want to give facts rather than vague impressions. So concrete language helps to support conclusions. And then present information in a concise, effective manner. Concise messages are key. You want to clarify effectiveness and expectations and responsibilities. You want to make sure that your message generates a response from a specific audience, and offer compelling persuasive arguments and recommendations as well. Communicating as a professional. You want to explain what it means to communicate as a professional in a business context. So you've been communicating your entire life, of course, But if you don't have yet a lot of work experience, the expectations of a professional environment, it may require some form of adjustment. So as the next slide will show, a good place to start is considering what it means to be a professional. Professionalism is the quality of performing at a high level and conducting oneself out of purpose and pride. Professionalism means going beyond the minimum expectations and committing to making meaningful contributions. Here we have the effective professional communication. We see this figure that it's ineffective professional communication. This is an example of ineffective professional communication. The review, the blue annotation to see just how many problems the message really has. And I'll go over with you. We have the vague subject line fails to alert people of the upcoming meeting. We have that the greeting is cold and off-putting. The opening paragraph fails to provide necessary background information for anyone who missed the meeting. That a negative accusation alone puts readers on the defensive, and it's a request for action that fails to clarify what needs to be done by when. And then the meeting information includes the day, but not the date, and which could lead to some form of confusion as well. And then the wording here assumes that people won't attend, don't want to, which might not be true. So the writer also fails to invite questions ahead of that meeting. And then the lack of a closing, so that thank you that contributes to the harsh, abrupt tone. And then the writer fails to provide alternative contact information or invite questions after the meeting. Now, an effective personal communication, here it's an example of an effective professional communication. Well, let's look over the blue notes here. We see that there's an informative subject line that helps people grasp important details immediately. The greeting is friendly without being too casual. The opening paragraph fills in missing information so that everyone can grasp the importance of the message. This upbeat paragraph emphasizes the positive value of the meeting, and request provides enough information that enables readers to respond. And the date eliminates scheduling uncertainty, that the writer offers everyone a chance to participate without making anyone feel guilty about not being able to attend in person. And the closing paragraph invites questions ahead of time so they don't need to deny the meeting itself. And then, like the reading, the close has a warm personal tone to it without being too casual. And the email signature provides additional information and can have an alternative contact opinion as well. Now, the elements of professionalism, we look at this throughout. We have striving for excellence. We have being dependable and accountable, being a team player, demonstrating a sense of etiquette, making ethical decisions, and maintaining a positive outlook. So let's go through the first portion of it. Now, be the best. The pros strive to excel, and excelling at every level is how you build a great career. Be dependable. Pros keep their promises. They meet their commitments. They learn from their mistakes and take responsibility for their errors. Be a team player. Pros know how to contribute to a larger cause and make others around them better. Be respectful. Good business etiquette is a sign of respect to those around you. Respecting others is not only good, but it's good for your career. Be positive. You owe it to yourself, your colleagues, and your company to maintain a positive outlook. So even when the going gets tough. And then be ethical. Responsible pros work to avoid ethical lapse and weigh their options carefully when facing ethical dilemmas as well. So understanding what employees expect from you. Well, their examples of effective communication skills include all of these following: acquiring, processing, and sharing information. This means organizing information so that it is cohesive and it uses information ethically. This is known as digital information fluency and includes critical thinking. We also have using communication to foster positive working relationships. This means listening and practicing good etiquette so that the workplace can function more effectively. Representing your employer in a public arena. So this means conducting yourself responsibly and professionally on social media, especially if you have a public profile. Effectively using the tools at your disposal. This means having a level of proficiency in all that you do. Now, communicating in an organizational context. For every organization has a formal communication network in which ideas and information flow along the lines of the company's organizational structure. So in a formal network, information flows in two main directions. We have that downward communication flow from executives to employees, and we have that upward communication flow from employees to executives. There's also horizontal communication, which flows between departments, and diagonal communication, which crosses the department lines as well. Now, taking it a step further, every organization also has an informal communication network that encompasses all communication that occurs outside the formal network. Some of this communication takes place naturally as employees interact on the job and in a social setting. We have informal communication as healthy as important, but if a workplace has too much of an informal network, it could be damaging to the organization. Now, formal communication network here, we see it's listed through blue being the examples of downward communication, purple being the examples of upward communication, red being examples of horizontal communication, and brown being examples of diagonal communication, excuse me. Now, formal communication network, we know that it is defined by the relationships between various job positions in the organization, and messages can have flow upward. So from a lower level employee to a higher level employee, a downward, and so forth. Now, we also have the flow all throughout for horizontal and diagonal as well. So take about 15 seconds to look through here, and then I will move forward. Okay, let's move on. Now, adopting an audience-centered approach, it means focusing on and caring about the members of your audience. So this approach is also known as adopting the you attitude. You want to learn as much as possible about your audience. So if you're addressing people who you don't know, you try to project yourself into the position by using common sense and imagination. We also have relating to the needs of others. It is a key part of emotional intelligence, which is widely considered to be vital characteristics of successful managers and leaders. The more you know about your audience, the easier it will be to concentrate on their needs, which in turn will make it easier for them to hear your message, understand it, and respond positively. Now, exploring that communication process, the contrast of the conventional communication process model with the social communication model, sometimes communication efforts fail. So understanding the communication process can help you communicate successfully. You can improve the odds that your messages will reach their intended audience and produce their intended effects as well. Now, the conventional communication model here listed, we see it listed, it's the 8-step model. It's simplified view of one cycle of communication. So in reality, the process is a little more complicated due to the noise, barriers, and interruptions. Understanding the basic concepts of encoding and decoding will help you as a sender and as a receiver. So the sender has an idea, first step. Then the sender encodes that idea in a message. Then the sender produces the message in a medium. Then the sender transmits the message through a channel. The receiver receives the message. The receiver decodes the message. The receiver responds to that message. And then the receiver might also provide feedback to the sender. And this is it listed out for you. When the sender has an idea, the success of a communication effort starts here, and it depends on the nature of the idea and the motivation from actually sending it. And the second step being that the sender encodes the idea as a message. So when someone puts the idea into a message, he or she is encoding it or expressing it into words and images. Then the third one, the sender produces the message in a transmittable medium. So the sender needs a communication medium to present the message to the intended audience. The fourth aspect, the sender transmits the message through a channel. The communication channel is the system used to deliver that particular message. The fifth one, the audience receives the message. It's not enough for the message to reach the intended audience. The audience must also sense that the presence of a message, select it from all the other messages, and perceive it as an actual message. Number 6, the audience decodes the message. So decoding is complex. Receivers often extract different meanings from the messages than the meanings that the senders intended. Number 7, the audience responds to the message. So before a receiver can respond to the sender hopes, the receiver must remember that the message long enough to act on it and must be able to act on it and must be motivated to respond. And number 8, the audience sends that feedback, so that verbal, nonverbal, or both. Just like the original message, however, the feedback must be from the receiver. It needs to be decoded carefully. Now, barriers in the communication environment, it can change or block messages. So the main barriers in communication environment are noise, distractions, competing messages, filters, and channel breakdown. You can minimize these barriers in the communication environment by being aware of them and not letting messages interrupt you as well. Now, inside the mind of your audience, understanding how audience receive, decode, and respond to messages will help you create more effective messages. Audiences receive messages by sensing it, selecting it, and perceiving it. Sometimes there's so many messages that selective attention occurs. Selective attention focuses on a subset of stimuli and ignores others. So in order to increase your chance of having your audience successfully receive your message, it's best to consider the following. One, the audience's expectations. Following the expectations of your audience is the most effective way to get your message across. To make message user-friendly, make sure that your messages aren't too hard to read or to find. Emphasize familiarity, so use words your audience knows and understands. Stay away from jargon. Particularly empathy, speak to your audience's wants and needs. And to design for compatibility, you want to make sure your audience will be able to read and listen to or view them. Now, inside the mind of your audience, how your audience decodes your message is also very important. So decoding is complex and personal process. It can influence the culture, individual experience, learning and thinking styles, ego, hopes, and so forth. The more you have in common with your audience, the more likely they will decode your message correctly. Now, here is a figure of how shared experience affects your understanding. We have two or more people or groups of people share experiences, personal, professional, or cultural. The more likely it is for the receivers will extract the intended meanings that senders encode into the messages. So little shared experience, meaning dissimilar, misunderstanding. We have average amount of shared experience, meaning similar, average degree of understanding. The large amount of shared experience, meanings are very similar, and there's a high degree of understanding as well. Now, how your audience responds to your message depends on three main factors. Your audience must remember that the message you sent in their sensory memory and that long-term memory as well. Your audience must be able to respond to your message how you want them to. And your audience must be motivated to respond to your message. Here's the social communications model. It differs from the conventional communication strategies and it practices in a number of significant different ways. So you see here different tendencies for the conventional promotion is publication, broadcast, lecture, intrusion. There's one-to-many mass audience, control, planned, sensitive as well. And then the social model being it has a discussion, permission, it's one-to-one, many-to-many. There's a form of influence, it's reactive, it has a response. Now, inside the mind of your audience as well, the social communication model offers many advantages over the conventional communications model. It also has two potential disadvantages for business. It can be less control over the messages and greater complexity due to false information and information overboard as well. The advantage being that social media has given customers and other stakeholders a voice that they did not have in the past. Using technology to improve communication, you want to identify 5 major benefits of business communication technology and 3 major innovations that are reshaping the practice of communication, technology being that main one. The 5 aspects here, those key areas, technology brings a wide variety of benefits to business communication, which can be grouped into 5 key areas. The first one being the making communication more effective by helping people craft messages that convey their ideas more clearly and persuasively. Second one being making communication more efficient by reducing the time and effort needed to create, transmit, and consume messages. The third one being to improve research tools to help communicators discover, process, and apply information. The fourth one being to assist communicators with decision-making by guiding them through complex set of data. And the fifth one being removing communication barriers so more people can participate in the communication process more easily. Now, to use communication technology effectively, you want to remember this. 1, keep technology in perspective. Technology is a simple tool. It is an aid to communication, not a replacement. 2, guard against information overload. So watch for information overload in which people receive more information than they can effectively process. 3, use your tools wisely. Be smart. Don't waste time on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and so forth. Use your tools efficiently. Number 4, knowing how to use your tools efficiently can make a big difference in your productivity. And number 5, reconnect with people. Know when to pick up the phone. Now, the spectrum of contemporary communication technology in your workplace, you will likely encounter social and work group communication systems, mobile communication, and intelligent communication technologies as well. So, social and work group communication systems include social media. Social media are digital platforms that empower stakeholders as participants in the communication process by allowing them to share contents, revise content, respond to content, or to contribute to new content as well. There's also millions of companies that use social media to connect with customers. Mobile devices and technologies offer multiple ways to improve communication and other key business processes. So to meet the needs of deskless workers, for example, this system from Zinc unifies everything from training materials to group messaging in a single app so that everyone in a company has instant access to information and advice. Taking it a step further, we have intelligent communication technology, the ICT. It uses artificial intelligence to enhance the communication experience. So business applications of artificial intelligence, AI, they're expanding. Some ICT capabilities you should understand are: number 1, machine learning and deep understanding. This means computers understand text, convert spoken language to written text, or recognize the context of photographs and videos. And then we have the natural language processing, the NLP. It involves giving computers the ability to understand language in that often unpredictable way humans speak and write, and to manipulate language in useful ways. And then we have the computer vision. Computer vision analyzes the elements of photos, videos, and live camera images to identify this particular context. Now, for ethical communication, we're going to focus on the difference between ethical dilemma and ethical lapse and the 6 different aspects of it. So, what is ethics? Ethics are the accepted principles of conduct that govern behavior within a society. Ethical behavior is a company wide concern, but because communication efforts are the public face of a company, they are subjected to particularly rigorous scrutiny from regulators, legislators, investors, consumer groups, environmental groups, labor organizations, and other stakeholders as well. So, ethical communication includes all information an audience needs in order to make an informed decision or take an informed stance on an issue, and it's not in a deceptive in any particular way as well. Now, the forms of unethical communication, it can have many forms, including withholding information, distorting information, and plagiarizing. Withholding information occurs when you avoid taking responsibility for mistakes or present an incomplete set of facts. The widespread use of social media has increased that attention given to the issue of transparency, which is a context refers to a sense of openness, of giving all participants a conversation access to information they need in order to accurately process the messages that they're actually receiving. And 2 important concerns in regards to this are the native advertising and sleuth marketing as well. Now, practicing ethical communication. So, examples of practicing ethical communication: it's misleading titles such as advisor. An advisor can affect your finances. What I want you to do is pause the video so you can read this. Do the critical thinking for yourself as a self-reflection. I won't go into reading it for you, but pause the video, read it to yourself, and do a little bit of critical thinking along the way. Now, forms of unethical communication, taking it a step further, we have the distorting information that occurs when words, numbers, or images are manipulated to conceal the truth. Business communicators must be more vigilant than ever as information consumers and more careful as information creators. Plagiarizing is presented someone or someone else's work or other creative product as your own. So plagiarism can be illegal if it violates a copyright, which is a legal protection from the originator's creative content. We also have fair use provides some flexibility in using others' creative work without violating any form of copyright. Now, this figure presents unethical communication. The writers of this memo clearly want the company to continue funding their pet project, even though the marketing research doesn't support such a decision. So by comparing this memo with the version shown prior, you want to make sure to make note of these annotations that I've listed for you. And you can see how the writers twisted the truth and omitted evidence in order to put a positive spin on the research. Again, for this, I want you to pause the video, read through for personal experience so I can get through the lecture. Now, distinguishing ethical lapse from ethical dilemmas, every company has responsibilities to its stakeholders, and those various groups often have competing interests. So, in some situations, what's right for one group may be wrong for another. So, an ethical dilemma involves choosing among alternatives that aren't clear cut. Perhaps two conflicting alternatives are both ethical and valid, or perhaps alternatives lie somewhere in that gray area between clearly right and clearly wrong. So unlike a dilemma, an ethical lapse is a clearly unethical or illegal choice. Here's your next figure that I mentioned. This is the one that you want to compare with your previous one. This is the ethical communication. The other one was the unethical communication. So again, pause your video so you can read through and find evidence of this being the more honest and ethical manner. Now, ensuring ethical communication, employers have a responsibility to establish clear guidelines for ethical behavior, including ethical business communication, and many companies establish an explicit ethical policy by using a written code of conduct, a written code of ethics, to help employees determine what is acceptable. These are the 5 questions that you would keep in mind to ensure ethical communication. The first one being, am I being honorable? Do my intentions show respect for my audience? The second one being, am I giving people the information they need? Based on the information given, they can take and make any informed decision. Number 3, have I considered the effects of my message? Have I considered the long-term effect it may have on the audience? Number 4, am I respecting the rights of others? Are the legal and moral rights of the information or ideas that I'm using being respected? And number 5, would a different approach be better? One that can produce a more positive outcome of those involved. Now, ensuring legal communication, we have laws and regulations of the promotional communication. Anyone who creates marketing messages needs to be aware of the many laws that govern the truth and accuracy in advertising. So we look at contracts. A contract is a legally binding promise between two parties in which one party makes a specific or specified offer and other parties accept. Then we look at employee communication, communication between employees to inform them on certain topics such as workplace hazards. And then we have intellectual property, that IP. It includes copyright materials, industry property such as patents, product designs, logos, and so forth. The protection of this digital and creative assets are a concern due to the increased effortless access to files. Then we have financial reporting. So finance and accounting professionals must follow strict reporting laws. Now, defamation, it's that intentional public communication of false statements that damage character or reputation. So if written, it's called libel. If spoken, it's called slander. Transparency requirements. Governments are helping consumers in promoting the need to disclose who is behind the information they receive, especially if it's online. And if you have any doubts about the legality of a message you intend to distribute, you want to ask for advice from your company's legal department. Now, developing skills for your career, we'll talk about the 6 related skills that have the opportunity to develop as you work in the communication aspect. So developing skills for your career, these skills are of importance: critical thinking, collaboration, knowledge application and analysis, business ethics and social responsibility, information technology skills, and data literacy. So for critical thinking, it's defining and solving problems and making decisions about situations. Collaboration is working with classmates on projects or working with teammates. Knowledge and application analysis, it's applying knowledge learned to other challenges. Business ethics and social responsibility, it's that ethical implication that you will encounter. Information technology skills is using projects to enhance skills in presentation software, so artificial intelligence tools, word processing apps, and spreadsheets. Then data literacy, the ability to access, interpret, summarize, and communicate data as well. Now, interpersonal communication skills. By the end of this portion, this is our second section of the business communication, you should be able to explain why listening is such a complex communication process and describe 3 steps to becoming a better listener. To explain the importance of nonverbal communication and identify 6 major categories of nonverbal expression. To outline an effective process of initiating, sustaining, and concluding workplace conversations. to explain the causes of workplace conflict, to identify 5 productive steps for resolving conflict, and to describe the importance of negotiation as a communication skill and explain how to prepare for and conduct a negotiation. Now, improving your listening skills. Well, let's talk about the complex communication process and the 3 steps to becoming a better listener. So listening is more complex process than you might imagine. There's the positive steps you can take to become a more effective listener. Unfortunately, as with all communication skills, you can improve your listening abilities through knowledge and practice. These being the 3 main listening involving unique challenges. The first one being conversations and presentations happen in real time. So effective listening means that you must engage while the speaker is talking and stay engaged the entire time. The second one being that unlike written documents, speech doesn't give you a visual record if you get lost or confused. And the third one being listening is complex because sounds need to be converted into words and sentences. Now, understanding why listening is such a complex process, a step further, there's more challenges that affect listening. We have poor self-management. Listeners need to manage their emotions and avoid creating distractions. We have the idle brain power. Your brain has a lot of extra processing capacity while you're listening. The ineffective listening, listeners need to adapt their style to different situations. Barriers to physical reception, so words can lead to misunderstanding. And then the flawed recall. So information needs to transfer from short-term to long-term memory. Now here is a table listed, the factors that complicate the listening process. We have real-time experience, invisibility, sound to language conversion, and then we have individual choices and behavior that are poor self-management, idle brain, ineffective listening style, barriers, and flawed recall. I'll give about a minute to read through that before I move on. Okay, let's move on. Now, becoming a better listener, some things that you can do is to minimize the barriers to effective listening. So there are internal barriers and external barriers that can prevent you from listening effectively. External barriers to listening are any factors that impede physical hearing or concentration. And in contrast, we have the internal barriers are listeners' behaviors, thoughts, and emotions that hinder one's ability to understand, interpret, or accept what someone else is saying. And then we adapt your listening style to the situation. There's 3 different types of listening, and there are content listening, crucial listening, and empathetic listening. In content listening, the focus is to understand and retain the information in the speaker's message. In critical listening, the goal is to understand and evaluate the information logically. In empathetic listening, the goal is to understand the speaker's feelings, needs, and wants. Then we have active listening. Active listening involves making a conscious effort to engage with people and to turn off any internal filters and biases to hear and understand what is being said and what they are saying. Now, this table provides the 3 styles of listening. We have the content listening, critical listening, and empathetic listening, and each is defined for you. Taking it a step further, at this point, you'll probably recognize the important point of understanding about listening is that you need to be effective. It must be an active process. So listening well requires energy, effort, attention. Active listening is making a conscious effort to engage with other people and to turn off your internal filters and biases in order to truly hear and understand what they're being said. Now, taking it a step further, to become a better listener, you should understand the 5 ways to help you listen more effectively. Put yourself in an open and positive state of mind. This means making a commitment to truly listen. Effective listening begins before a conversation, meeting, and or presentation starts by putting yourself in the right frame of mind. You want to keep yourself engaged. So this means managing your behaviors, thoughts, and emotions while listening. The techniques of a vocalized listening can help you stay focused. And while someone else is talking, repeat the key ideas for yourself silently, analyze their meaning, and summarize that related points of information is important. We also need to focus on compartmentalizing thoughts and emotions unrelated to the topic at hand. It can also help you stay focused and engage. You want to respect silence, so don't automatically speak at the first moment of silence. Sometimes silence is an important part of conversation. The other person might be collecting his or her thoughts or looking for a clear way to express something. You want to pay attention to nonverbal signs. Nonverbal signs of communication are important. So one of the advantages of oral communication over written formats is the ability to see what isn't being said in the form of nonverbal signals. So these include hand gestures, facial expressions, posture, eye contact, and so on. So if information you are likely to receive in a conversation or presentation, it will be important to use during the exchange or later on write it down. So don't rely on your memory. If you're unable to take notes and have no choice but to memorize, you can hold information in your short-term memory by repeating it silently and creating a list in your head. So to store information in long-term memory, here's the four techniques that can help. 1, associate new information with something closely related. So make a connection. 2, categorize new information into logical groups, such as alphabetizing. 3, visualize words and ideas as pictures. And 4, create some form of mnemonics such as acronyms or rhymes. Here is the behavioral difference between effective and ineffective listeners. Some key points being to put themselves in an open, positive frame. This is an effective listener. Take careful notes and to adjust listening style to the situation. An ineffective listener would be to fail to paraphrase, listen with the same style regardless of the situation, and to take no notes or ineffective notes. This is a step further. Again, you can pause the video when you need to and read through each one. Now, improving your listening skills. For a quick reminder of these steps you can take to become a better listener, here's your checklist. You can recognize the unique challenges of listening and take steps to overcome them. Lower external barriers to physical reception whenever you can, such as minimizing ambient noise. To lower internal barriers to reception and understanding by monitoring and managing your own emotions. To try not to slip into defensive listening, to be able to, when you're hearing, even if you don't agree. To adapt your listening style to each situation, to commit to listening actively, put yourself in an open and positive frame of mind, keep yourself engaged, respect silence, be aware of nonverbal signals, and take notes if appropriate. And don't rely on your memory, write down or record important information. Taking it a step further, let's talk about improving your nonverbal communication skills. So let's talk about nonverbal communication skills and what it is. It is a process of sending and receiving information, both intentionally and unintentionally, without using language. So nonverbal signals play a vital role in communication because they can strengthen or repeat a verbal message, weaken or contradict a verbal message, or replace words entirely. Nonverbal signals can convey a significant amount of information, but be careful of claims conveying a specific percentage of messages of content as well. So you can have heard the claim that nonverbal signals convey most of the messages in a face-to-face communication. Now, recognizing nonverbal communication is difficult as it is complex and somewhat difficult to pin down. Not all signals are controllable, and signals don't always mean what people think they mean. In a face-to-face conversation, everything from your body language to your clothing to your eye movement, it can influence the messages and meanings that the other party takes away from exchange. So during a phone call, the pitch, rate, and other qualities of your voice can send nonverbal signals. Even with written messages, design and formatting choice send nonverbal signals, although the focus here is on interpersonal communication. So we look at the 6 types of nonverbal signals. So we look at facial expressions, vocal characteristics, gestures and posture, personal appearance, touch and time and space. Facial expressions being that your face is a primary vehicle for expressing your emotions because it can reveal both the type and intensity of your feelings. We look at vocal characteristics. Aspects of voice carry both intentional and unintentional messages. So a speaker can intentionally control your pitch, pace, and stress to convey a specific message. Gesture and posture. The way you position and move your body expresses both specific and general messages. So some voluntary and some involuntary. Many gestures, a wave of the hand, for example, have specific and intentional meanings. Personal appearance. People respond to others on the basis of their physical appearance, and sometimes fairly and other times unfairly. We also look at touch. Touch is an important way to convey warmth, comfort, and reassurance, as well as control. And then we look at time and space. So like touch, time and space can be used to assert authority, implement intimacy, and send other nonverbal messages. Here we have the major types of nonverbal. You can send nonverbal signals continuously via just about every aspect of your physical being. Using nonverbal communication effectively, paying attention to nonverbal cues will make sure that you're a better speaker and a better listener. So an open and forward posture will reinforce your message of cooperation. So when you listen, pay attention to the speaker's nonverbal cues. Be observant, but don't assume you can read someone like a book, particularly if you don't know the person's normal behavior patterns. If something doesn't feel right, ask the speaker an honest and respectful question. Also, consider the nonverbal signals you send when you're not talking, the clothes you wear, the way you sit, the way you walk. Compare those verbal messages you receive, the nonverbal signals that accompany them. So improving your nonverbal communication skills, here's your checklist. Understand the roles that nonverbal play. Note the facial expressions. Watch for cues and gestures. Listen for vocal appearances. Recognize your listeners. And as a general workplace rule, avoid any physical contact beyond a handshake. Pay attention to the use of time and space. Now, developing your conversational skills. An outline here, effective process for initiating, sustaining, and concluding workplace conversation. Good listening skills and an awareness of nonverbal communication are the foundation of good conversational skills. The ability to plan, initiate, maintain, and conclude successful business conversations. You will engage in a wide variety of conversations throughout your career, from brief and spontaneous chats to formal, structured conversations such as interviews, evaluations, and so forth. So a view on every conversation is a potential opportunity to gain or share information, to give or accept help, to foster a beneficial relationship, or to build your own personal brand. Now, initiating personal business conversations. Unplanned business conversations occur at random moments throughout the workday. These conversations aren't part of your regular work duties, and these conversations tend to be some of the most beneficial ones for your career. So the best way to initiate one of these spontaneous conversations is to ask the other person a question about his or her work or some issue that affects the company. Avoid gossiping and complaining unless you're expressing sympathy with someone's plight or brainstorming solutions or workarounds. To initiate and plan conversation, be sure to have an agenda or a discussion plan to define the first topic of conversation and then identify which person will lead to that conversation. Put yourself in a receptive frame of mind and a pleasant professional demeanor, and remind yourself not just get defensive. Taking it a step further, you want to look at, it froze. Now, maintaining a positive conversational flow, some tips for this would be that you don't talk nonstop. Talking nonstop for an extended period is self-centered, tiring for listeners, and it prevents listeners from actually participating. You don't want to interrupt either. So interrupting is rude, and it sends a strong signal that you don't respect other people. Whenever information you may have to add can wait until it's polite to respond. There's an expressive disagreement and criticism indirectly, so look for ways to question the statement without making it feel like a personal attack. Stay engaged and appear engaged. Use a brief conversational response and nonverbal signals to let the other person know that you are engaged. The techniques for this include maintaining a comfortable amount of eye contact, nodding your head to express agreement, and to express brief confirmations about major points about the conversation. You want to also summarize and re-energize and refocus. So one helpful tactic is to summarize what you've learned and heard the other person say to this particular point. So this gives him or her a moment of rest, and it helps them verify that you've heard everything correctly. You want to ask direct questions. So ask questions to draw out information, encourage the other person to participate more fully. And then ask indirect questions as well. So you are Depersonalize the query by rephrasing it as, can you walk me through the decision process, which shifts the focus from the other person to the decision-making process. Alternatively, you can phrase it as prompt rather than a question, such as, I'd like to hear more about the process leading to this decision. Now, gracefully concluding a conversation, bringing a conversation to an end can sometimes be an awkward step. Some conversations are bound to be a specific time limit, and others have a natural structure that brings the conversations to a close. So, to conclude a business conversation, you want to leave a positive impression of yourself and a conversation. You can quickly summarize any action items that came up, either reiterating something you will do or subtly confirming that the other person will do. The final exchange is the opportunity to leave a positive impression of yourself and the conversation. Now, handling difficult conversations, all business professionals eventually find themselves in situations where they need to have difficult and unwelcome conversations. So whether it's giving an employee a negative performance evaluation, explaining to your boss why your project you've been assigned is unworkable, or simply trying to smooth things over with a colleague, difficult and unwelcome conversations are challenging. So some tips include: rehearse your active listening skills, put yourself in an open frame of mind, prepare thoroughly, make sure you have all the facts in order, visualize the situation from the other side, be sure you're understanding your audience. So if you're upset, vent before the conversation. Make sure you vent some of the emotional pressure in a controlled way beforehand. Clarify and compartmentalize your emotions. Stay tuned to your emotions. If you're getting overwhelmed, see if you can take a short break. Here is some lists of improving your conversational skills. Prime ones being not to interrupt, express disagreement, criticism indirectly, ask direct or indirect questions, and so forth. Now, explaining the causes of workplace conflict and identifying 5 productive steps for resolving conflict. Conflict is virtually inevitable in any workplace, as people with differing ideas, priorities, and personalities, they're thrown down and asked to work towards common goals. And in a dysfunctional environment with ineffective management, conflict can overwhelm normal business activities. So this section will focus on conflict arising in the workplace and specific communication strategies and tactics that we can to solve workplace conflict. Now, workplace conflict can arise from a variety of causes. Some conflicts are structural, meaning that they are more or less permanent aspects of being in business. So, for example, some companies have an infinite amount of money to spend on operations every year, and every department is competing for the share of those funds. So, a secondary category involves situation conflicts, which arises from temporary forces within an industry or company. The company assigned from this project team, for instance, may not agree on what the team's goals and priorities should be. And a third category, we have that interpersonal conflicts that stem from choices, behaviors, and personality traits of people within a team, department, or a work group. Now, the sources for workplace conflict, as you can see an example in here listed, some conflicts are blameless, so in which they stem from natural forces in the business environment, and other conflicts have a more personal origin. They may be by the fault of other people being involved. In addition, we have the structural and situational conflicts that magnify interpersonal conflicts and vice versa. Now, let's talk about constructive versus deconstructive conflict. Although the term conflict sounds negative, conflict isn't necessarily bad. Conflict can be constructive if it forces important issues into open and increases the involvement of team members, or it generates creative ideas for solving a problem. In contrast, there's conflict that is destructive if it saps productivity, damages morale, or threatens to spread other people in an organization. So when this happens, it's time to step in and actually address the situation. When you encounter conflict in a work setting, you want to follow these 5 steps in this section that can help in a positive and constructive way. Step 1, decide whether the conflict warrants taking action. Not all conflicts are worth the time, energy, and disruption it might take to resolve them. Step 2, examine your own beliefs and behaviors. So if you personally are involved in the conflict, step back and examine your own perspective before taking any action. Step 3, identify where the conflict originates. Conflicts can originate at different levels of depth. At the shallowest level, the conflict might simply be about language. So when people use different terminology to express similar thoughts, you want to look at the deepest level. People disagree about fundamental values and principles. Step 4, establish common ground. Identify the highest level at which the parties to agree. And step 5, choose a strategy for resolving the differences. Now that you've clarified the precise cause of the conflict, you can start working towards a resolution. Here are the 5 steps to resolving conflict. You can pause the video to read through each one. I won't read it for you. And then the levels of conflict. So conflict can originate at a variety of levels, from shallow differences in language to deep disagreements about fundamental values. And the apparent conflict cannot be the real conflict. So before attempting to resolve a workplace conflict, you want to be sure to identify the real source of the disagreement. You want to look through each one of these and look if it's organizational priority, cultural priority, values, and so forth. Pause the video to read through the list. Now, common strategies for resolving conflict. Let's talk about avoidance. In some situations, the best solution is to avoid circumstances that create the conflict rather than trying to fix the conflict when it does occur. For example, if 2 people are working on a project, teams simply don't get along, it might be in the team's best interest to divide tasks in such a way that the 2 don't have to actually work together. Then let's talk about accommodation. One side is a common aspect for the conflict can decide to accommodate or sacrifice for the good of the organization or to maintain harmony in the relationship. Then we talk about compromise. In contrast to accommodation, the 2 sides can choose to meet somewhere in that middle ground, which both sides giving up something. That balanced compromise is one of hallmarks of successful teams and groups. And then collaboration, whereas compromise seeks the middle ground, but requires some sacrifice from both sides. The parties can choose to collaborate on a new solution that satisfies everyone's needs and expectations. So collaboration in this sense can be rewarding and experience because it makes conditions better for everyone and it gives a team or group the satisfaction of a shared accomplishment. And then in some instances, we have conflicting parties that can benefit from mediation, where a neutral third party guides them through the steps of resolving mediation to conflict. So when the 2 colleagues or a subordinate and manager can't reach agreement on their own, for instance, they might ask for a representative for human resources department for help. Mediators can help manage the emotions of a situation and ask probing questions that get them to the root of the problem. So mediation is a conflict resolution, often requires negotiation to move parties toward a mutually acceptable solution. Here's managing workplace conflicts listed for you. Now, developing your skills as a negotiator. Negotiation is an interactive process whereby 2 parties with opposing or competing goals reach a mutually acceptable outcome. Negotiation is a valuable skill that will serve you throughout your career, and achieving many of your professional and organizational goals will depend on, in some degree, on negotiation. So people negotiate frequently in their personal professional lives. So as with listening, most of us tend to assume we're fairly good at it. Common errors include settling for less than one could get, giving up more than one needs, rejecting an offer that is better than any available alternative, and accepting an offer that is worse than other alternatives. We have another kind of error that is not negotiating at all, such as accepting the first salary you're being offered without making a counteroffer or asking for additional benefits. Now, understanding key principles of negotiation, one of the key reasons for common negotiating errors is a misunderstanding about what negotiating is all about. Negotiation is an adaptable and ethical process that combines cooperation and competition in varying degrees, so depending on the situation. Researchers indicate that the higher emotional intelligence, which leads to greater self-control and generally makes people more likable, also makes people better negotiators. Such individuals are better able to monitor and manage their own emotions, and their positive approach promotes a cooperative spirit that can lead to more win-win approaches. Now, preparing for negotiation, effective negotiators prepare thoroughly and follow a mediation process. We have the preparation, which involves 3 main steps: understanding and clarifying your own position, evaluating the other party's position, and assessing the situation. Preparation starts with understanding yourself and what you hope to achieve through negotiation. So starting by establishing your target, which is the sum of values you should like to achieve throughout your negotiation. Be careful of several potential mistakes here, including limiting your target to a single item such as salary or purchase price. Next, you want to figure out your best alternative of what you might achieve through negotiation. You can never want to accept a negotiated settlement that is worse than your best alternative. And there's no point in negotiating if you know it will never equal or exceed your best alternative. Finally, you want to determine the least attractive offer you are willing to accept, and negotiators often refer to this as a reservation point. Let's evaluate the other party's position. Get as much information as you can about the other party's position. Ideally, you would like to know the other party's target, best alternative, and reservation points, as well as your own. So compare negotiation range with your best assessment of the other party's negotiation range. And we have that bargaining zone, which is where there's an overlap room for negotiation. Assess the situation. So different situations call for different negotiating strategies. So here are some key points to consider. Is this a one-time deal or an episode in a long-term relationship? If it's a part of a long-term relationship, you need to be more mindful of how to possess and process the outcome it will affect on the relationship. Can you walk away if you don't get what you want? The option of walking away from a deal is a powerful negotiation chip, but you don't always have that option. If you're negotiating the deal of a new assignment with your boss, you probably don't have the choice to refuse the assignment if you can't get everything that you want. Is this a ticking clock? Do the negotiations need to wrap up before a specific date? Can this work for you or against you depending on the circumstances? And then is the amount of negotiable value fixed? So in some negotiations, the sum of total of the value involved is fixed, and the parties are negotiating on how to divide the pie, so to speak. The situations are known as distributive negotiations. And if it is an equipped supplier acquires a product for about $10,000 and your counteroffer is $8,000, that $2,000 difference is that pie that you can divide through negotiation. So if you settle at $9,000, the deal gets done. Both sides end up with less attractive price than they either initially wanted. Can you expand the range of negotiable value? Well, in contrast to the distributive negotiations, there is integrative negotiations as well, and the parties can bring more of the table and create deals that work out better for both sides. So if an employer can't increase its salary offer, for instance, it might offer other incentives such as a moving allowance or a company car, and these types of negotiations tend to be more cooperative and focused on a long-term mutual success. Now, negotiation begins with one party makes the first offer, and you can come across the advice to never make that first offer, but there is no conclusive evidence to support the wisdom of this advice. So if you are prepared and ready to start, make an initial offer that is near the upper end of your bargaining zone, but still within or close to what you surmiss in the other party's zone. So support your offer with verifiable facts, such as publishing salary range of this position. Whoever makes it the first offer establishes the anchor that all subsequent negotiations work from. Anchor is the value point or put forth of that first offer. It establishes the point that all subsequent negotiations work from. And there is a counter offer to the first offer signal that can be prepared to a negotiation. It resets that original anchor. This serves for two main purposes. The first is letting the other party know that they're willing and prepared to negotiate. The second is adjusting the anchor established by the first offer. So remember to listen more, talk less, never argue. Listening is important because you can pick up clues in the other party's target and reservation point. And when one side makes its final offer, the other side then decides to accept it or walk away. So depending on the magnitude of the deal and the circumstances, negotiation can take anywhere from a few minutes to many months to complex business deals. Here is a list of becoming a best successful negotiator. Take your time to look at it, pause the video. And our last portion of this lecture being collaboration and business etiquette. By the end of this section, you should be able to list the advantage and disadvantage of working in teams, describe the characteristics of effective teams, explain how teams evolve, and offer advice on working in virtual teams. You should also be able to offer guidelines for collaborative communication, identify major collaboration technologies, and explain how to give constructive feedback, as well as to list the key steps needed to ensure productive team meetings, and he explained the importance of business etiquette and identify 5 areas in which good etiquette is essential. Now, communicating effectively in teams. What is collaboration? Collaboration is working together to solve complex problems, and it is an essential skill for workers in nearly every position. Types of teams. A team is a unit of 2 or more people who work toward a shared goal, and unlike other work groups, it depends on one another to achieve the goal. Team members have a shared mission and a collectively responsibility for meeting their team's objective. The Teams use participative management. Participative management is the effort to involve employees in the company's decision making. And companies use a variety of team formats and sizes, and teams can have a permanent or temporary aspect to it. A committee is a permanent team that has regularly occurring tasks. And there are three types of temporary teams. So problem solving, project, and creative teams as well. And there is a cross-functional team assembled that people from the multiple functional areas within a company. Here are the common types of business teams. We have committee, problem solving, project, creative, and cross-functional. Pause the video to read through each one. There are advantages and disadvantages of teams. Teams can provide organizations with an advantage. Among these are more information and knowledge, learning opportunities, boldness, accountability, trust building, a broad range of viewpoints, the buy-in for solutions the team creates, improved performance, and a sense of community in the good times and bad. And some disadvantages can also be being on a team. Among the disadvantages are groupthink, hidden agendas, costs, and employee overload. Groupthink occurs when peer pressures cause individual team members to withhold contrary opinions and to go along with decisions that they don't really believe in. Some team members may also have a private or counterproductive motives. They're known as hidden agendas. The cost of being on a team is also a factor. So aligning the team members' schedules can cost money. Lastly, there is employee overload. So some employees may be too many teams and have too many team assignments. Now, the characteristic of an effective team: successful teams share many of the same attributes. Among them are a shared sense of purpose and compatible values, a clear and challenging goal, a belief in the value of the team's effort, a well-balanced mix of people who can provide the insights and skills needed to achieve the goal, a size that aligns well with the team's responsibilities, that positive behavioral norms that promote psychological safety, encouraging people to share information, propose unproven ideas, and to express vulnerability without the fear of repercussion. And we have a willingness to put the team's needs ahead of the individual needs as well, and an open and honest communication. For group dynamics, it is an important concept in teams. So group dynamics are an interaction and a process that take place among the members of a team. The norms are the informal standards of behavior or conduct the members share and the guide the member behavior. In examining team roles, there's two main types. We have team maintenance and task-oriented. Team maintenance roles focus on the interpersonal and social aspects of the team, and in contrast, task-oriented roles focus on work quality and productivity. Now, the stages of the team development. Tuckman's model of team development identifies the 5 phases that the teams go through. The 5 phases of the team development are forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Each of these phases is important to effective team development. Forming is that first phase. In the forming phase, the group comes together. The second phase is storming. So in this phase, the team members discuss their positions and they become more assertive. The third phase is norming, and in this phase, conflict resolve themselves as that team beginning to have a clear and cohesive personality. The fourth phase is performing. So in this stage, the group is ready to perform its task. And last phase is adjourning. So in this phase, the team has accomplished its task. Now that it's accomplished, the team then disbands. Here is the phases listed out for you in chart form. Pause the video to read through. Now, virtual team, it's one which members work in at least 2 different locations and rely on technology to communicate and collaborate. So there are benefits and challenges to working together in a virtual team. Among the benefits of working in a virtual team are the virtual team can pull together in the best people for a task, and it can be the benefits of telecommunication, increase engagement and productivity. There's also challenges of virtual teamwork. So among the challenges are the limitations of the available technology and interpersonal communication issues. Teams play an important social role in many cases, for instance. So as long distance team members can develop a sense of emotional isolation and the feeling of being out of the loop. Now, here's a presented list of virtual team environment. 1, you want to keep them as small as possible. Launch an in-person event if possible to get to know one another. Use the best technology available. Clarify the purpose of every tool. Keep distance members in the loop. And don't rely solely on written communication. Each of these tips can help your team be successful in a virtual environment. There's also guidelines for collaborative communication and identifying major technology aspects to it. For collaboration agreements, communications can collaborate in a variety of ways, from simple writer-edition relationship to a full collaboration. So in a writer-editor relationship, it's important to clarify expectations. This is the simplest form of collaborative communication. Another type of collaboration agreement is full collaboration. So with full collaboration, team members work together from the beginning of the project to the end of the project. And collaboration offers lots of potential, but it must be planned and managed thoughtfully to realize these benefits. And here's some tips for collaborative communication projects. 1, you agree on the goals first. 2, you map out how the work will be done. 3, take advantage of each person's strongest set of skills. 4, establish frequent checkpoints. And 5, accept different writing styles as well. Giving and responding to constructive feedback. Feedback is an important part of communication process. Giving and responding to constructive feedback is an essential professional skill. Constructive feedback is also known as constructive criticism. So with constructive feedback, the focus is on the process and progress and outcomes of the communication. So it's not focused on the people involved. The goal of the constructive feedback is to be helpful. And in contrast, the destructive feedback, it's also like complaining or bullying. Now here we have giving constructive feedback. Pause the video. There's a list of different explanations presented for you. Then we have technologies for collaborative communication. There are a variety of tools and systems available to help writers collaborate on everything from short documents to presentations to formal reports. And commenting lets colleagues write comments on a document without modifying the document text. So there are collaboration systems to help collaborative communication. Cloud computing is an example of collaboration system in which primary software and work files reside on the internet rather than on local computers. Other collaboration platforms include content management system, wikis, shared online workspaces, social networks, work group messaging system, intranets, and extranets as well. Now, collaboration communication can also occur with the mobile device. So mobile devices add another layer of options for collaborative writing and other communication projects, particularly when using the cloud computing. Collaboration apps are available for mobile devices and support nearly all of the features of computer-based platforms. So an important aspect of mobile collaboration and mobile communication in general is unified communication. Unified communication integrates voice and video calling, voice and video conferencing, and so forth. We have artificial intelligence can also be used in collaborative communication. AI collaboration helps people work more effectively. Taskbots can assist teams with many different tasks as well. Now, we're also going to focus on how to ensure productive meetings by preparing carefully, conducting efficiently, and using technology wisely. So preparing for meeting is a key step for needing to ensure a productive team meeting. The first step is to prepare the meeting, is to make sure that the meeting is really necessary. This can be done by defining the meeting's purpose, selecting the participants, and choosing the venue and time, and selecting the agenda. We see here meetings can focus for the purpose on exchanging information, reaching decisions, collaborating to solve problems, or identifying opportunities. For selecting participants, invite everyone who really needs to be involved. Choosing the venue and time, morning meetings are more productive. And then setting the agenda. So what do I need to do? What issues are most important? What information is required to discuss with me, and so forth. Here's an effective meeting agenda. You can pause to read through, see the time slots listed, the objective, the facilitator, time, date, location, the pre-study, and so forth. Now, leading attributing to efficient meetings. So everyone in a meeting shares the responsibility for making the meeting productive. The following guidelines will help leaders and participants contribute to more effective meetings. So 1, keep the discussion on track. A good meeting helps to draw out the best ideas and information the group has to offer. 2, follow agreed upon rules. Robert's Rules of Order is used to help plan and run effective meetings. Then encourage and moderate participation. A good meeting involves all of the participants. Participate actively. Don't interrupt. Use mobile devices respectively. And lastly, be sure to conclude the meeting, making sure that the objectives have actually been met. It's important to keep track of what's happening at the meeting. So for this, the conventional method of recording meetings is thoroughly written minutes, a summary of important information presented, and the decisions actually being made. Here is an effective meetings minutes list for you. Take about a minute to look through, pause the video. But meeting minutes should record all of the information that participants need to refer to on later. Depending on the circumstances, you might want to include information that anyone who wasn't able to attend can review in order to get a summary of key discussion and decision points. Here is a chart listed for capturing key decisions and discoveries from a meeting. So meeting tools such as Meeting Booster system helps teams and other groups capture decisions and discoveries from meetings and putting this information to productive use. Here is a checklist for you for improving meeting productivity. You can pause the video to read through. Now, conducting virtual meetings. Virtual meetings are meetings in which people join in for 2 or more locations and connect via the form of communication technology. One seminar, online seminars, they're known as webinars. And this tool for virtual meetings range from conference calls and group messaging chats to real-time collaboration systems, smartphone apps, small support groups, video calls, and the WebRTC capability lets people communicate via video through standard web browsers and mobile apps as well. Here is with broadband wireless connections, virtual meetings are easy to conduct with smartphones or tablets, Zoom being a prime one. Now, the tips for successful virtual meetings. You want to make sure that the meeting has a well-defined task so that it steadily moves toward a goal. You want to provide pre-study materials as needed in addition to agenda. For large meetings, assign people to specific roles, such as a facilitator who guides the discussion, a technical specialist who helps people if they experience difficulties with their connection without interrupting the meetings, and someone to record the actual minutes. You want to make sure everyone has up-to-date versions of whatever tools you plan on using. And if all participants don't know each other, the facilitator should perform introductions or ask people in turn to introduce themselves. So if the system doesn't offer a way for people to virtually raise their hands to ask a question, the facilitator should explain how to pose questions. You also want to ask as a participant, log in on time, be present mentally and emotionally, mute your audio input if you need to cough or otherwise make noise. If you type to take noise, make sure your keyboard or device won't distract you. As you work towards each agenda item, you want to summarize that's been discussed and ask if anyone has questions or comments. And as the facilitator, periodically check in with each person if feasible. Now, developing your business etiquette, explaining the importance of business etiquette and identifying 5 areas is of importance. Etiquette being the expected norms of behavior in any particular situation. It's essential to every aspect of interpersonal communication and team collaboration. These are the 5 zones of professional etiquette. Professionals should pay attention to their effect on other people in the 5 areas: in the workplace, in social settings in which they're representing their firms, while online, while using the telephone, and while using mobile devices as well. Workplace etiquette includes a variety of behaviors, so habits and aspects of nonverbal communication. You want to follow these following tips for a pleasant and productive workplace. Respect each other's people's time, such as showing up on time for work, meeting on time, and not taking up colleagues' time with gossip or too much personal chit-chat. Don't interrupt people in conversations or in meetings. Watch your language. Pay close attention to cleanliness and avoid using products with powerful scent. Avoid eating at your desk if possible, particularly in open plan offices. Keep the noise level down. Respect other people's personal space. Don't gossip. Don't come to work when you're sick. In general, avoid discussing religion, politics, or other potential emotional issues. There's 4 business clothing styles in the workplace, ranging in formality. We have business formal. This is the most formal with tailored suits and conservative colors. Business professional. This is that based around suits or coordinated sets. It's less strict than business formal. Then business casual. It's adapted in more relaxed offices. And then casual, this varies and can include jeans. Now, etiquette is particularly important when you represent your company out in public. So here are some tips for you to be successful. Make sure their appearance and actions are appropriate to the situation. Get to know the customs of other cultures when it's coming to meeting new people. When introducing yourself, state your first and last name and include a brief description of your role in the company. Business is often conducted over meals, so it's best to know the basics of dining etiquette. This will make you more effective in these situations. And in social settings, help others feel welcome. You also should focus on learning the basics of professional online behavior to avoid mistakes that could hurt your company or your career. You must adhere to a high standard of etiquette. Avoid personal attacks. Stay focused on the original topic. Don't present opinions as facts. Support your facts with evidence. Follow basic expectations of spelling, punctuation, capitalization. Use virus protection and keep it up to date. Watch your language and keep your emotions under control. Avoid multitasking when using messaging or other tools. Don't waste others' time with sloppy, confusing, or incomplete messages. Never assume you have privacy. Be complete of online commenting mechanisms and respect boundaries of time and virtual space. Here's also some important tips for using phones at work. Be conscious of how your voice sounds. Be courteous when you call someone. Convey a positive professional attitude when you answer the phone. End calls with courtesy and clarity. Use your own voicemail feature to help callers. And be considerate when leaving voicemail messages. Your mobile device habits send a signal about the degree of respect you have for those around you, so you should avoid the following: using obnoxious or inappropriate ringtones, failing to mute your phone during meetings, talking loudly in open offices, talking in on your phone right next to someone else, making or taking unnecessary personal calls at work, invading privacy by using your phone's camera without permission, taking or making calls in restrooms, texting during meals, avoiding incoming calls to interrupt meetings, and last but not least, using voice recognition so it disrupts others. And that is the end of our lecture.